Welcome back to the Travsessed podcast. We're your hosts, Kim and Aaron, and this week's episode is another interview with our travel friends, Alex and Keaton McCoy.
This one was fun because with Alex and Keaton, we talk about parenting and traveling with kids and living in an RV with kids and going from being settled to then up and traveling again with kids and leaving a full-time job essentially to be a stay-at-home parent in a camper. And so it's cool because we don't have kids, obviously, and so we don't know anything about that type of experience. So to hear their perspective, and I don't know, I just feel
I would automatically be like, oh, if we have kids, we have to stop traveling.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that do it, and Alex and Keaton are the one couple that I know of personally, right? I'm sure there's many out there. But basically they started as like solo married couple travelers to then having kids to then stopping travel to then saying, let's get our 2 toddlers, get a camper and travel that way. And Keaton stays home with the kids now. I mean, it's like insane.
Their story is really cool. And I think what else I loved about this interview is they give a lot of good tips for just parenting in general with in relationships while traveling with kids. And there's so many like wisdom drops throughout, like sprinkled throughout, like we weren't even really trying to, but it was just their answers to the questions. We're like, wow, like that's such great advice. Like they just, obviously nobody's perfect, but it feels like they have a really good system and they're in sync together. They work as a team and they figure things out as they go. And it just feels like they're on the same page, and they have a lot of good insight into trying to find quote unquote really balance. There's no such thing, but balance kind of within all of the craziness, right? Craziness of working a travel contract, being parents, living in an RV, wanting to adventure, but also needing to get shit done.
Being an entrepreneur.
Alex is an entrepreneur. She's an amazing copywriter. She does graphic design and like all kinds of just like cool design stuff. And yeah, so I just feel like there was so much good inside of this episode, and you guys are going to love it.
So much good in between the technical difficulties.
So let's pivot. So this episode is only an audio because, again, they were in a camper and had shitty Wi-Fi. And so unfortunately, we weren't able to do the video because it kept cutting out. It wasn't strong enough. And then there are parts where the audio goes a little bit kind of in
wonky,
and out.
Yeah.
But I would say hang in there because there's so...
How you never want to start a podcast.
Just hang in there, guys.
Hang in there.
I swear to God, just hang in there. You're going to love it.
It's building character.
It's that there's so much good sprinkled throughout, so I feel like you can get past kind of the shitty audio at times. It's definitely worth the listen, especially if you have kids, especially if you're thinking about traveling with kids. And they basically prove that you can absolutely do it, and it's way better than what their life was like with the kids, both working full-time, to now the freedom that they have, the money they're making, all the memories, the experiences they're making with their girls. It's just inspiring.
I would even add to that to say that, like, even if you're thinking about traveling and you don't have kids and you're thinking about RV travel, this is one of those episodes that you can be like, wow, if they can do it with 2 kids and the camper and what, then I can do it. You know, so it's kind of like inspirational in that way too.
Yeah, you can do it too.
What was that?
I don't know.
I mean, usually you make comments about things
blacked out for a second.
That like resemble something. That was just pure you.
I felt like you got that Scooby-Doo vibes.
It was like Scooby-Doo and the genie from Aladdin.
I don't know. I was like thinking, and so I wasn't really...
That's what came out.
I wasn't really listening.
Wow.
So then that just came out. Because I was trying to fill in the space.
Okay.
Anyways, go follow Alex. We'll put the... I don't know. It's like Alex McCoy. I don't know exactly what her Instagram is, but we'll put it in the show notes. And then also check out her new copywriting business and all the work that she does, because has such a attention to detail. She is so good at what she does, and
she's done work for us.
Yeah, I've hired her. She created our Patagonia guide, or not our Patagonia guide, our traveler school workbook. Yep. And then what else? She did something.
The Patagonia.
The Patagonia guide. Yeah. And just blown away, phenomenal work. And she's so creative and just doing all kinds of cool stuff. So go check them out.
And also, when she's not an entrepreneur, she is a travel nurse, and Keaton is a travel PT.
Oh yeah, we never said that.
Which we never said. So, but they get into that story throughout the podcast, and it's just like Kim said, it's a really good story. Really fun interview, and we really enjoyed it. So without further ado, welcome Alex and Keaton to the Travsessed podcast.
And before we jump into the episode, and before we jump into this week's episode, if you are Travsessed, which we know that you are because you're listening to this podcast, you are definitely obsessed with travel and getting out of your comfort zone and trying new things, having adventures, all of the things. Go check out our Travsessed merch. We officially launched our website. It is up and running. Officially. Last week. I'mTravsessed.com. But we have awesome hats and sweatshirts and shirts that are, say, Travsessed, obsessed with travel, with like the plane and the runway. It's a vibe. Like, even if this wasn't our brand, as a traveler, I would be like, that's so cool. Like, I want that. Yeah.
It says a lot about you as an individual, which we love.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's super cool. So go check those out at I'mTravsessed.com and make sure to tag us at I'mTravsessed when you are out and about wearing your cool gear. Or no, what are they? Merch. Our merch just dropped.
There's going to be new merch dropping soon.
Yeah, we're creating a cool new shirt too. So anywho, let's get into the episode.
Please prepare for departure.
What's up, Alex and Keaton? So glad you guys are here. We have our coffee this morning. I don't know if you guys have anything to sip on. Water. There we go. So cheers.
Welcome to the Travsessed podcast, you guys. We are so excited to have you guys here.
Yeah, we're super happy to be here.
Super excited.
Yeah.
This is my disclaimer. If you hear children in the background, or one of us hears, come back.
Yeah. Which we're going to get into. I was going to ask you, but I was like, okay, I was going to ask you where the children were, but I was like, we'll wait till we get into it. Because we want to dig into so much with you guys. Like, you guys are a traveling couple. You traveled and then you stopped traveling. You had some kids, started traveling again in a fifth wheel, which you're currently doing now. And so we want to dig into all of that stuff with you guys. But first, kind of taking it back to when you guys first decided to travel. So the first time, before the kids, before the RV, all of the things, kind of what was life like for you guys then, and why did you decide to start traveling?
What gave you that push?
To jump in this crazy life.
Okay, so when we graduated college, he decided he was going to go to PT school, and I had graduated with my nursing degree. And initially, as a tech, I worked. Sorry, I worked as I realized my arm was going to fall.
Yeah. I know. We have tight squeezes over here. We're trying to get into the shop.
Especially if you talk with your hands, boom.
So I graduated nursing school and decided I initially was going to work at the hospital I was working at while I was in nursing school, and then this one decided he was going to go to PT school. So it kind of changed our plans. So we moved to southern Missouri, which was kind of our first experience living away from home. We completely uprooted and started over 2.5 hours from home. And then my job was a baptism by fire kind of new grad experience. I learned a lot, and I'm really thankful for my experience, but it was such a toxic work environment. And so I was a year and a half in. His program was 3 years long, and I was looking at, first of all, we were on one income, which is nothing if you're a nurse in southern Missouri. Yeah. And so I'd been working tons of overtime and picking up all these incentive shifts, and I had to take cool and stuff. And I started looking at travel jobs, and I was like, this is stupid. Like, I was like, I'm working night shifts, so I don't see him like for 3 nights in a row anyway, sometimes more. Like, sometimes I would work 5 night shifts in a row. Like, it was insane. And so I was like, why wouldn't I drive like 2 or 3 hours from where we're living and double my income? Like, it seemed like a no-brainer, like, when we started talking about it. And it was funny because I brought up, I was like, yeah, then when you graduate, you can travel too. And he was like,
So that was an interesting situation. So actually, when she brought it up, the piece she's leaving out is she came home on her birthday, working for a year and a half. And then I quit my
Hey, Keaton, I got that. Hey,
Hold on.
hey.
I said, don't worry, I'm working.
Hey, guys, we lost you.
Your picture is gone. Okay, so we had a few technical difficulties, but we are back.
That's how travelers roll. We roll with the punches, baby.
Well,
right.
And
Very authentic here.
We didn't say this before, but you guys are in New Mexico somewhere in a campground, right? Currently, we're speaking to you from.
I'm sorry, we're having a sound problem with the girls.
Oh, that's okay. This is real life. This is traveling with your kids in your camper, right?
Yeah, so you had asked earlier what the kids were doing right now. They currently have Alex's phone and are watching Frozen and just discovered the volume button.
Oh.
That's where we are. But yeah, so we're at a campground right now living in an RV in Albuquerque. Not Omaha anymore.
No. So it's a whole different story.
But yeah, diving back into where we were, kind of how we got here. Alex came home on her birthday and basically told me flat out when I was in PT school, hey, I quit my job. Which panicked me a little bit. You know, I was in school. I wasn't due to graduate for another year and a half. We had no other income at the time. And so I went to class that day. She was like, I'm going to figure something out. Don't worry. And then within 3 hours, she called me and said she had a job offer to work in Jefferson City and was making double 2.5 times what we were making. It's crazy.
So wait, Alex, you just said you guys were married, and you're like, I just quit my job, but don't worry, I'm going to figure this out. I love it.
I had researched it. So I'd talked to a recruiter. It was kind of like a 6-month long, should I do it? Should I not? We had gotten married.
We may get a guest.
Yes.
Hashtag good life. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. There we go.
All right. So, it had been a 6-month long process of talking to a recruiter, doing research, looking at how much it would cost for me to stay out of town, things like that. And so I basically had 4 shifts in a row or something, and I came home and I was like, this is stupid. There was a lot of political stuff at work, a lot of unfair, what I call was unfair things going on.
Too.
Yeah, we had a couple travelers, so I talked to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, I basically I stayed PRN at my full-time job for a minute, so I did stay PRN, but I was I had a verbal offer, I quit my permanent job, and then I signed my contract later that day or something like that. I was lucky because back then, the market's crazy now, but I was lucky in that it moved really quickly then. But we were also living in rural Missouri, so I think they probably didn't have tons of job applicants either. So
right. So you kind of thought then, I'm going to take this as a travel job while he finishes school and all of that, and then that kind of then led to being actually maybe we should really do this and move around.
Yeah. So I approached him. I actually found, this is so crazy, but Jared Casaza's first blog post, I literally started reading right at the same time he started writing, when he was just writing about travel therapy and not so much about finance stuff he got into. And so I found them and I was it was the only thing out there about that I found about travel PT. And I think I was Googling travel physical therapy, which is probably why I didn't find Julia, because he was the only physical therapist that was
Okay, so we are back for a second time. This was a video podcast, but due to the lifestyle of healthcare travelers, we are always out and about and can't always rely on our internet activities and strength. So
well, we have to be flexible and adapt. And here we are.
Here we are.
We're keeping it moving.
That's right.
Okay. So Alex and Keaton are back. Yeah. And okay, so Alex, you were talking about how you guys kind of transitioned from doing this from like just a quick gig while Keaton finishes school. You found the PT blog, and then how that led into you guys actually making the leap to start real traveling.
Yes. So I guess I can let Keaton talk about kind of like traveling as a new grad PT, because that was, as nurses, we have to have, I had 18 months of experience. So usually that's like the bare minimum they suggest. But with PTs, there's opportunities their clinicals are different. So there's opportunities to like travel as a new grad.
Yeah. So for me, our entire third year of PT school is all clinical work. So I had been effectively in the clinic for over a year by the time I started traveling. Now, what I hadn't done was been completely on my own. As a student, I always had my clinical instructor looking over my shoulder, watching my work. You get a feel for the clinics you're at and kind of the way they do things. So stepping as a new grad with no guidance into a new setting was pretty difficult. The problem I ran into is with PTs, a lot of times, if you don't have any experience, you kind of get bottom of the barrel as far as jobs go. They're looking for anyone they're looking for a living body is what they're looking for. And so I ended up in skilled nursing for almost the first full year of my career.
And you also didn't have the best recruiter advocating for you.
Yes, and I also didn't have the best recruiter. I also had an added challenge. Of having to try and find my placements near where Alex was working. So PT in general, the job opportunities when they come up, you don't have as long ahead of time. They can't predict needs quite as well as they can with nursing. So inevitably, Alex would pick up wherever we were going next, and about 2 months before we would go, and then I would spend the next 2 months trying to find a job in and around that area. So that's how I landed kind of in skilled nursing facilities, which the job itself I never particularly minded. But back then, before a lot of the law changes and everything like that, it was a lot easier to see where directors in rehab were trying to just push for minutes instead of what was actually best for the patient. And so I struggled a lot with that in my first year as a new grad. I learned a lot. Talk about trial by fire. That was definitely at my first job in Wisconsin. But, after that first year, I actually took a break when we were in Seattle and then moved into rehab. And then from there, kind of bounced around. I've done a little bit of everything now: skilled nursing, rehab, outpatient, home health, and acute. And by the time I got around to really a year and a half in, I felt pretty confident in what I was doing.
Well, and I feel like you had to learn like your voice too, to like speak up when you saw stuff that was just like plain wrong. Because there were a couple times that like he kind of got into like ethical like dilemmas where he had to where he had to decide. Like one time I remember like someone had like messaged him like as we were leaving an assignment, but like his contract date was over and we were in like another state, and they tried to tell him that he needed to go back. They were like, "Oh, we need you to go back and chart this thing for like reimbursement or whatever." And I was like, "No, like don't do that." Because that's just, it's all about money. And so they were like, "Oh, well, if you didn't chart this one specific thing," I was like, "Well, if they were worried about that, they should have like
so that
checked the thing before you
that case specifically, they wanted me to go back in, and I think they had a gap where they didn't have a working therapist. They wanted me to do discharges on the patients that I had worked with. Now the problem with that is any licensed therapist can read through the notes and do discharge notes on patients if they haven't technically done, which is how that works. So if I don't discharge a patient, let's say on like Friday and my contract ends, the therapist coming after me on Monday could read through my notes, gather all of the correct information, assuming I documented well, and do the discharge, which is what they had me do at the start. However, they had a therapist who refused to do that when they came in. And so they were trying to pull me back on board to do it. And I was like, well, no, my contract's over. I'm not going to do that because I don't work for you now. It was a really strange situation.
But you kind of had to like learn. You had to find your voice when it came to stuff like that.
And there was a lot of pieces that, especially on the billing aspect for PT, that they didn't. They certainly don't teach us in school, and it took me a long time to learn the intricacies of each piece of the puzzle. The way we bill an acute is different than the way we bill an outpatient. Is different than home health. And so every time I went to a new setting, it felt like I was doing that again and having to relearn, how and why. Which,
right.
I'm 5 years out now, having done, 2 years of outpatient, 2 years of rehab, and a year of skilled nursing effectively, and some home health sprinkled in there. I think I've got a really good handle on it now, but it's one of those, you don't know what you don't know.
Well, and I think too, this is kind of like a side street, and we can edit this out if you don't want to talk about it, Alex, but I think, we've been traveling for 10 years. We've never really dealt with something where we had we had to kind of make a decision of, I don't feel like my patients are safe, or I feel like this is wrong, what's happening. And I know that this is something that does come up in traveling, especially with nursing, with PTs. And I know that you just left a job, Alex, and started a new one because you felt like things weren't kind of going the way that you thought maybe they should. I don't know if you want to talk about that, of just like, that's kind of hard to do, to speak up for yourself and then decide that you're ending a contract and you're leaving. But I know this comes up for a lot of people.
Yeah, and even looking back, I don't know that Keaton would have ended any of his contracts. He probably would have just like been more direct with people. But like in the scenario that I was in, this was the first time. So that it was my 12th contract, and I've worked a lot of like really, really busy places. I've had like pediatrics, typical ratios like 3-to-1, 4-to-1, and I have been in places where I've taken 5 or 6 patients, and so like I know how to juggle and manage my time pretty well at this point. So I was in a situation where I had like a really, really crazy day. There were a lot of things that I was like, this seems like it's not safe. And, but like when you're in it, you're just trying to survive it. So I was at work that day from like 6:45 until 9:45.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And yeah. And then I like didn't really have time to process like how bad it was, because I was literally just trying to keep my patients alive and get them bare minimum of what they needed. I can't even say I gave like great care that day. And then the next day, it started all over again, and it was basically the same thing. And they had floated one of our staff members at the unit that day, and I was like, it hit like noon, and I was like, I think this is the point where like the line is drawn. Like I was like, I don't think I can keep doing this. Like, just like I was in an ICU. I had 3 patients the first day, and then the other nurse had 2 patients, and they were all very sick. We had patients that were like needing blood pressure medications, and had been recently extubated, were like not oriented, confused. We had patients with like ICP monitoring, which is a lot of times like a 1-to-1, or very like if they're paired with low acuity. And in addition, I was traveling off the floor with my patients, and so there was like essentially no one to like watch the patients that I was leaving on the floor. And so that for me was kind of the line where I was like, okay, this is where I can like clearly document and say like, this is not safe. Like I'm leaving an ICU status patient in the unit. I'm leaving the unit because all ICU patients have to travel with a nurse, which you guys probably know since you're in radiology. Yep. And rightfully so. And so I'm taking my ICU patient downstairs, leaving another 1 or 2 ICU patients upstairs. And I know for a fact, like my charge nurse has barely sat down at the nurse's station. So like, who's watching my kids that I'm leaving behind? Right. And so that's where I was kind of like, oh, and then I also started like, I missed a couple of orders like completely. Like didn't realize that I needed to do them, didn't have time to sit and look at my like new orders. And I've never ever done that. Like I've never been one to just like completely miss something. Like if I miss something or if something's late, it's because I've made a choice to like manage my time and prioritize things, which happens a lot in ICU. But I've never just flat out like not known an order existed because I haven't had time to look at my like charting or my new orders from my doctors. And that's when I was kind of like, oh, these are things that like I could actually get in trouble for as a professional and against my license. And so luckily I was really supported by my company. I actually texted my recruiter. So I worked a Sunday, Monday, and the Sunday was the really, really bad day. Monday was pretty much just as bad. And Monday night I got off and I texted her. I sent her a voice message and was just kind of explaining everything. And she told me, she was like, you don't have to go to work again if you don't want to, which was amazing. Like she was like, if you feel like you can't safely go to work, then I will support you. I will back you up. And she was like, but also, if you want to give 2 weeks notice because you need income, like we can also set really hard boundaries with the hospital. And if they don't support those boundaries, the understanding is that like you will not work anymore for them. So I was really, really lucky there that my recruiter basically like, I explained like, I just kind of hit like the tip of the iceberg, right? When I sent her messages, and she was just like, here are your options. We support you 100%. Like, do what you feel like you need to do. And then she was also like, as soon as we give notice to your current facility, like ethically, we can start submitting you to other contracts. So she was like on it, man. She was like sending me like contract after contract after contract. Like, here are all the things, like here are the most, the quickest start dates, like things like that. And she just really like came through for me in that situation, which I cannot like appreciate enough, because I know there's companies that would probably be like, no, we're not gonna like, you know, piss off this company or this hospital because you are unhappy, basically. So, and it was a big facility, and it was, I mean, this won't give too much away, but it was in Omaha, which is where like a lot of companies are based. So, I mean, I feel like that says a lot too, because I'm assuming most of the companies don't want to like go against a lot of the facilities in Omaha because they're like local, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah,
totally. I think that's like awesome, because one, like Kim said, we don't really have a lot of experience to speak on when it comes to unethical type of behaviors from a facility, but we do always try to teach the travelers that it's about seeing the bigger picture when really selecting a company and a recruiter, that like how much support do you have, and really having the travelers ask those questions when they are interviewing for a new recruiter, because that is vital. Like you said, I mean, I can't imagine if they would have been like, sorry, basically the relationship with this facility is more important than you, and then you're left on an island for the entire time and possibly something major happening. Like, I love that she supported you and was there for you, because that's a really good thing to have as a traveler.
Well, and I think just being a traveler, that would be challenging as far as having the confidence, right, to stand up for yourself, to speak up, to advocate for yourself, to say, hey, like, I don't feel safe. This is different than just like, oh, this contract sucks. I can put my head down and get through 13 weeks and move on. It's like, you didn't feel like your patients were safe. You didn't feel like you were able to do your job, and you had the confidence to speak up for yourself and then address it with your company, and knowing that the facility is also going, you have to speak up to them as well. And I think that takes a lot of confidence, and that there would be, you would be really, I personally would be very nervous to do that.
Well, I would go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would add too, that the undertone of that is also the second guessing of yourself, of like, am I just having a bad day? Am I over analyzing this? Like, of course, that's where I go. Because, I mean, there was times that I've texted Kim in this current contract, I'm like, today's my last day.
Yeah.
And, like, it's ridiculous. I'm walking out, like, this is crazy. It's nuts. It's not safe. But then I realize that I'm just being really dramatic, and the patients are safe. It's just not the way that I like to see things done. And so I think, you know, kudos to you and hats off to you for having the courage to really evaluate that, because that's a big step.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say, like, I probably took like 2 days or so to like really like chew on it. And I think the hardest part, and Kim and I actually talked about this, was like I gave my notice, and so I gave 2 weeks notice. And the other weird thing was like nobody at the facility talked to me about any of this. So like I told my company, and then they handled the communication. I didn't talk to my manager. I didn't talk to the like scheduler. I didn't talk to anyone, because I was just kind of like, I don't want to cross any lines that I'm not supposed to cross, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so, and I also, like, you know, I work for a smaller company, and so they had to go through the vendor, then to the hospital, then to the, you know, so I'm like, I don't know, maybe my manager didn't know I was leaving until 2 days before I left. I really had no clue. And so, I feel like, it was almost the harder part was like going to work after I had noticed, because I didn't know if people were like shit talking behind my back. No, I mean, like, I think most of the full-time staff knew that it was. Yeah. And I think most of the full-time staff knew that it like wasn't ideal, but I don't think that they necessarily knew that it was like at an unacceptable level. So I think, yeah, it was just that was probably the worst, was going to work for those like 2 weeks. And then my last day, like, nobody acknowledged it was my last day. I actually had a really horrible, like, just like heavy, very emotionally heavy day that day. And then it was kind of ironic because the girl that was charging was PRN staff. And so she like didn't really charge very often. And at like 6 o'clock, she was like, oh, you could probably go if you want. And because we had lost, like, a couple patients had gone out that day. And so she was like, you can probably go home if you want. So like she unknowingly let me leave like a half hour early on my last day. And I was like, peace. Like, I cannot get out of here fast enough. This is so awkward.
Oh my
wow.
God. That's the thing. Is the awkwardness is like, yeah, you have your talk with your company, but yeah, like go, because you chose to go back. You weren't like, oh, I'm done, I'm never going back. And then, the awkwardness of being with the staff, knowing that they do probably know, but then, like, nobody's talking about it. It's like, awkward. But I think, too, for anybody listening that ever finds themselves in this position as a traveler, it's like really being able to feel safe to advocate for yourself, even if your recruiter or company is pissed off, or even if it's awkward. It's like being able to speak up and to feel safe and to know that there is a difference, and you do have to take a step back, like you said, Erin, of like, is this like not safe, or am I just really pissed off because I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off and I've had a really shitty day? Like, there's a difference there, and when you know the difference, then you speak up for yourself if it's really bad.
Totally.
You know? Okay, so shifting gears. So you guys decided to take the leap, you started traveling, and I don't know, but once you guys got out there, right? So like Keaton, you decided to get into the PT, you guys are out there, you're traveling the country. Were you like, wow, like we've had some, tough times, but all in all, like, I'm so glad we made this decision, and this is such a cool lifestyle, and the money you're making and the freedom. Were you guys like, hell yeah, we made the right decision?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, our plans, I don't want to say they were derailed because of the kids, because they certainly weren't. That was also planned. But COVID derailed our plans. When we had Jade, the plan was only to be home for a year, to be home, be near family, have kiddo, and then take off again. And the travel therapy market tanked with COVID. And so Jade was about 4 months old when COVID hit. And so she would have been, it would have been another 6 months later we were looking to travel, and the market still hadn't recovered at that point, which is why, for therapy at least, which is why we decided ultimately to stay home as long as we did.
But yeah, we were not ready.
We weren't ready to quit when we stopped.
No, and I think our experience as full-time staff, mine was I felt a little more like jaded. I feel like going back to full-time staff. Keaton ended up in a pretty good position?
Yeah, so I actually worked 2 jobs full time. I worked a rehab position that it was a good position, but rehab for me changed with COVID as well. A lot of the things that made it more neurologically based were removed due to like Medicare laws and stuff, so that they could get more effectively what ended up being skilled nursing patients into hospitals because they had no place to put them. So the level of care I was providing decreased just because our patient acuity was higher and people couldn't tolerate like what inpatient rehab requires during COVID. And so I was real frustrated with that and made the switch to outpatient with one of my former clinical instructors who he taught me a lot. And then I actually ended up at a clinic with a good friend of mine now who he and I just had a great chemistry as far as working with patients back and forth that way. So I ended up in a really good position. So the hardest part for me is, it was staying in that same spot. Like I had a good spot, and if I could have packed that job up and taken it with me around the country, I would have been fine. But ultimately being home in Kansas City was great for family. But all the stuff we love to do, all the stuff we wanted to see wasn't there.
And that was ultimately like, and we went home too. Part of the reason was I was like, oh, I need to be on like permanent insurance because I'm going to have a baby and be a responsible mother and all these things. Mm-hmm. And the thing that we didn't really take into account is like we got home I started my job in July and I had my Jade, my oldest, in November. And my insurance kicked in until like end of September. It was like, because there was like, so many days waiting period and all this stuff. So like, which was fine because we had been paying cash for our visits anyway. And honestly, like as long as you have an uncomplicated pregnancy, that's really not that big of a deal. But it was one of those things that like the quote unquote benefits I thought I was coming home for, I didn't really get because like my insurance didn't kick in till the end. And then, Missouri doesn't have any laws on like paid maternity leave. So I got whatever PTO I had accrued in that time that I was there at my job, which was like a week and a half. I don't even think it was that long. I think it was like maybe 2 weeks. So like I didn't even get a paid maternity leave. So that wasn't any different than if I had been traveling, and I was making less money. So like hindsight is like, I almost wish we would have gone and like maybe taken local contracts or something because we would have made more money.
The only benefit was, were we on separate insurance at that time?
We didn't have to worry about Cobra, I guess.
Well, and because we were on separate insurance, I ended up needing knee surgery in the midst of all that. So I took unpaid leave.
That was good, I guess.
Oh my God.
Because we had separate insurance instead of family insurance, we paid between her hospital visits and then my surgery, we paid down 2 deductibles that year.
Wow.
So the travel income would have been handy.
Right. So you guys,
and it was.
you guys knew then, okay, you were going home. The plan was you were going to have Jade, and then you knew you were going to get back into traveling at some point. COVID happened, and then you guys had another baby Cece, and then
who you've heard in the background.
Yeah, who's been with us on the podcast today. And so you guys had 2 kids. And then when did you know, like, you were like, okay, let's give this a go now that we have like 2 kids, like, let's jump back into traveling? Like, what was that like?
Well, so I think it was me again.
Well, I think it was a combination. So honestly, this is where we sound more like all the other travelers that started during COVID. A lot of it was financial for us. The cost of 2 kids in daycare at this time is astronomical. And so we were very fortunate. My oldest sister, she has 4 kids of her own. 3 of them are like school age. She actually spent, probably 9 months total, 9 months watching our kids for daycare when Alex went back to work and I was working full time. Yeah. And we were paying her and everything, but we weren't paying her effectively fair market value. But she basically had said, hey, we had trouble when we had to. I had a friend come through for me. Let me help take care of your kids. And so what happened is we started discussing, like, okay, how can we make a little extra money? How can we do this? And my sister called me one day, sometime not too long after Christmas in 22, and said, hey, when summer hit, I can't do this anymore because I can't have 6 kids at home. I've got my own kids that are trying to raise. And she was like all torn up about it. And that's when Alex was like, well, what if we tried traveling weekend with the kids, see how it went. So,
yeah, because effectively she had one in preschool, one at home full time. So she only had like 3 or 4 at a time, like during school year, but she knew like once summer break came, she didn't want to have like all 4 of her kids plus our 2, but she gave us 6 months notice. So we kind of had some time to like sit back and like really think about what options we had.
So ultimately, what we ended up doing is Alex took a contract in St. Louis starting in January of 2022 while I worked full-time in Kansas City. And so the way it worked out is she worked nights, Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights. I worked during the days, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4/10s. And my sister had the kids Monday and Friday. And so basically I had the kids on the weekend in St. Louis. Like I would drive them out to spend the weekend in St. Louis with her. Then my sister had them starting the end of the week. And then Alex had them while I was at work during the week.
Yeah.
And that was
like a pretty nice setup as far as like I was able to be home with the girls like Monday evening through like Friday morning, and then it was kind of a test. I always joke it was like a test run for Keaton being a stay-at-home dad, because he got to see like what it was really like to have the girls like all day long on like Saturdays and Sundays.
So yeah, I had no help at all because she slept during the day. And so we got a couple hours, in the evenings where we would hang out and see them, that kind of thing. But it ultimately, it was a good test run. And I was driving, it's probably 200 miles from KC to St. Louis. I was driving 400 miles a week just back and forth to do that, to make sure we got to see her. Because I didn't want to sit at home in Kansas City and not see her all weekend,
Right.
And Cece was still so little at the time. She was still breastfeeding too.
Oh, yeah, that was the other part, was like having to nurse her. But so it was like kind of a test run / like a good way to save up money. So we took that 3 months. I was making like a killer rate because it was weekend nights. And we paid off our car, which we owed like what, $12,000 on when we started it. Yeah. So we paid off essentially like half of our car loan, so that we didn't have a car payment anymore. And then just like saved money with the anticipation of like, if this goes well, then we're going to actually like, I'm going to quit my PRN job. He's going to quit his full-time job, and we're going to like do this for real. And so in May, that's what we ended up doing. And it
felt like a giant game of chicken because she didn't think I was going to quit.
Yeah, I was not convinced. His gig was pretty sweet. He was working 4/10, so he had Tuesdays off, and he was 5 minutes from our house. So it was like a really good situation for him. But like at the end of the day, we knew that if we were at home working like quote unquote regular jobs, if we paid for full-time childcare, like we had no money left to do anything fun. Like, right. And we were back in that situation where we were like planning this like 2-week trip to Utah that we wanted to do. And that was like it. That was like, we were going to take our 2 weeks to our little road trip, and like that would be our vacation for the year. And the other thing that kept coming up is like when you have kids, especially like the first like year and a half, they like have to run through all the different like illnesses and stuff. And so we were constantly having to use like our call outs or our PTO. Like the other thing is I was like, oh, we'll have PTO. That'll be so nice. But then like,
I lost all of my
all of Keaton's PTO went to, we were off for COVID, and then like hot water at work because we were calling in because like our kids were, running a fever or like throwing up. And it was just like, it's so, and I will say this like again and again and again, it is so valuable to have a parent that is able to stay home full time, because just so many like random things come up, and it's just nice to have someone that's like able to kind of hold down the fort at home, and then you're not trying to juggle the like sick kid thing. That was probably the hardest for us. It's better now, like they're not sick as often, but when they're really little, like it's just inevitable. Like, they're at daycare, they run like a tiny fever, and the daycare is like, oh, you can't come back for 24 hours. You're off like after 2 days of work usually, because it's like, okay, well, they started running the fever at noon, and so I have to leave today and call in tomorrow because daycare won't take them back, So it's just we got into that cycle where we were like, we didn't really have a lot of fun money, and we didn't really have a lot of time to do fun things. And we were like, we just can't live like this anymore. Like, we were like, and we had probably just had a taste of the good life traveling previously. So we were like, okay, like, we know that there's a better way.
Well, and also, sorry, I'll just say, and then you can say, also, I think knowing too, coming from traveling, right? And then going back to full time, like, and Aaron and I talk about this all the time, that, one of us can work and make way more money than if both of us were working a full-time job. So it's like to be able to have that freedom to be like, oh, Alex can just work, or Keaton can just work, or right now Aaron's just working, and we're still making way more money than we were making when we were working full-time. So it's like, it gives you that sort of financial support and freedom to make those kinds of decisions, where a full-time job, like if we were both working full time, we would have to both be working full time, so. It's
right. And in healthcare, like your days off don't always line up. Like I was working a lot of weekends so that like we didn't have to worry about childcare. So yeah, it was just, a lot of our days off were actually not spent like together, which is the nice part too of only having one person working.
Right. Yeah, and Kim, to go back to that point, you're exactly right. I had a lot of patients who were really bummed out that I was leaving and everything like that. They said, well, why are you doing this? Why are you guys not trying to do it now? Is it just the travel? And I was like, let me paint you a picture. We're working full time. She's working weekends and on my day off to try and limit how much we're paying for childcare, how much we're relying on family. And her job in St. Louis was making 2.5 times what we were combined in Kansas City, which is just astounding that she could work 3 12-hour shifts and make more than double what we were putting in, 80 hours a week.
Right.
Totally.
So I think that was a huge piece. That was a huge piece for us.
No, absolutely. I think it's
great too. I had taken. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, there's like a lag. So
go ahead, Keaton.
Yeah. So all I was going to say is, and the time off piece of it, so when I started full-time, we were home effectively 3 years. It was June of 2019 until May of 2022. And in that time off, apart from my surgery where I was off for 3 months, off for 2 months. 2 months. I was off for 2 months. Aside from that, though, I had 2 weeks off for Cecilia when she was born, and we took one 10-day trip to Colorado. Mm-hmm. And that was all of our vacation that we were able to use. No, it was like 5 days.
You had 10 days off.
I had 10 days off, though, on that stretch, yeah. But that was all of our vacation in 3 years.
Wow.
Whereas, because I had taken time off here in Seattle, I'd only worked 6 months out of the year and made more money in 2018.
Right. Totally. No, I think
it's real easy to justify it looking at that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what we talk about all the time. I mean, it's just like the freedom. I do think it's crazy, though, because if you look at our community, you guys are the only ones that I know that started traveling as a married couple, decided to have kids, had kids, got back on the road, and then decided, fuck it, we're going to get a fifth wheel and now do RV travel. So I feel like you guys are the travelers that have covered the entire gamut of what you can do as a traveler. And I just think that's so interesting. The conversations that had to go into that, the decision making, and then also living both sides of that, and just kind of your opinion on almost traveling as a married couple, then traveling with kids, and then traveling with kids in an RV.
Well, and just to piggyback what you're saying, where did the idea to do the RV travel? Because I know when you guys traveled the first time, you did housing like normal. So to go into choosing to do the fifth wheel, and kind of what went into that decision, and also what has that been like comparing to how you were doing it the first time staying in housing?
Yeah, so I guess I'll talk about kind of all the decision making, and then maybe Keaton can talk about how, because he does a lot of the engineering as far as the traveling with the camper. But so one of the things, and this has been true, I had a lot of mental health struggles after our first. I had really bad postpartum. It was actually OCD and anxiety, which you don't hear as much about. And so I think one of the biggest things that I give advice to new moms and parents and stuff like that is just having a really open mind and mindset, and just learning to let things go is so big, which is totally against my personality as a baseline. But that's one of the things that, like, in the last 3 years, I feel like we've really worked on as a couple, is just to, like, that, like, your mindset going into everything is so crucial to the outcome. And so, like, when we talked about traveling with kids, we were like, well, like I said, we kind of did our trial run with the weekend job, and we were like, you know, if we go and it's terrible, we can always come back. And then, you know, so just always having that, like, open mindset of, like, we can always change our minds, and we can always change, like, kind of our course if we feel like something's not working, and just being really open and honest with each other about it. And then the same thing, like, when we took off together, like, I'm not gonna lie, there were a few weeks. So our first assignment out of state, like, truly, where, like, Keaton did not have a job. He was full-time with the girls. The first, like, few weeks, I kind of worried. I was like, oh, I don't know if this is gonna work out, because it's such an adjustment period going from, like, interacting with adults all day to, like, being a full-time parent, which is, I mean, I guess we're all full-time parents, but, like, you know, like, he was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. Like, I clean things and they mess it up, and, like, we do this, and, like, everything just, like, nothing goes according to plan when you're dealing with two, and ours are really close together too, so that adds a different level of, like, difficulty. Mm-hmm. But so I was like, no, like, seriously, you need to tell me if this is, like, not gonna work. Like, we can, and just and so, like, there's that where we have to have, like, really honest conversations with each other. And then also, I feel like being able to just, like, laugh and, like, not even laugh, I won't even say we laugh every time, but just, like, letting things go, like, just being like, you know what, like, it's a wash today. That's been one of our big things, like, road tripping with kids. Sometimes we're like, oh, we have to go, like, 9 hours today, and we get, like, 6 in, and, like, we're gonna call it, like, you know, it just are really, 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 like, I know this sounds so cheesy, but, like, mindset has been everything, and communication, I think, is a big thing. So
yeah. And so as far as, like, the actual logistics of it, it was hard. The transition was difficult because, you know, it almost becomes an identity question. You know, I was a physical therapist, I did this and this and this, and now I am this stay-at-home dad, and, you know, you can't put a value on that. But at the end of the day, I have my entire life to be a physical therapist. I've got a few years that I can take care of these kids at home and be with them 100% of the time, which is huge, huge for me. Mm-hmm. As far as, like, the decision-making process and that side of things, it was scary. I definitely struggled more than she did with we can just turn around and, you know, we can go back if we want to. Because I typically I'm more the financial side and piecing, and I want everything to look good on paper and see how exactly it's going to work out, which is not the case in this realm especially. And so, like, for me, that kind of leap to having to see, okay, let's just see how it goes was a difficult change for me. But ultimately, you know, they were really young when we first started in Richmond. Cece had just turned a year. Jade was only 2.5.
She started walking in Richmond.
Yeah. And so, you know, already now, here we are 6 months down the road, it's completely different with a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. Mm-hmm. And, you know, for me, I think that makes it easier because they're more independent, they're more mobile, I can communicate with them a little bit more. And even in St. Louis, I mean, when we first were going out to St. Louis, Cece was still an infant. She was 7 months old, and Jade just turned 2. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely gotten easier from that point as they've gotten older. But, you know, it's ultimately super, super fun. And we've been able to do so much more. Like, we obviously went to TravCon with you guys. We were able to go out and stay in Utah and see her brother run an Ironman. We drove to Florida before that trip.
Yeah, so my brother does half Ironman, so we got to see him qualify in Panama City and then compete at Ironman Worlds in St. George. Like, that stuff, like, St. George was like this itty bitty town in Utah. If we weren't traveling, because it was like planes, trains, and automobiles. Like, you were like, oh, we have to, like, fly into Vegas and rent a car and then drive to St. George, you know? Yeah. So, like, we wouldn't have had the time off, much less, like, the money to do that if we weren't traveling. And so, and, like, next year, Worlds are in, well, he's going to try and qualify for Kona, which is in Hawaii, or the half Ironman Worlds is in Finland, right? And so we're sitting here like, oh, we can actually like
we can consider this,
doing those things, which like we never would have been able to do. And like it's been so good. Like I feel like I hear other parents that are like, oh, I can't do this because my kids, or I can't do that because my kids, and like really like I feel like have done a lot of work to like adapt to things like as a unit, instead of being like, oh, well, we're not going to do XYZ because we have kids, because I think it's made our kids like they're just better humans. And
really?
Like they can handle a lot, and they're very and they get excited about things. Like we went on the tram yesterday. There's a tram that goes up the mountain to this like restaurant overlooking Albuquerque, and it's like really freaking cool. And we were the only people as kids, I think.
Yep.
And like we're those people all the time. We're like, oh, like we went to a winery and sat with our kids. Like we had Cece in a stroller at the bar, and we're like, well, like if we're allowed to do it, like why not? You know, I mean, we asked for things like that, but like it's just like, I don't know. We didn't want to feel like our lives were limited, but also I don't want our kids to feel like we like stopped our lives for them. Like that's been a big thing for me as a parent, is I don't want them to feel like they're like a burden, or they're like holding us back from things.
Well, and it sounds like too, like you guys have brought the kids into your life to adapt to like this lifestyle that you're currently living, and having these adventures and being on the road and all these different things, like, and not kind of adapting to maybe what their schedule is, but having them adapt to like your lifestyle, which then in turn, I guess if you start that at an early age, that just becomes kind of the normal of a child, right? That
totally.
They can just
well, and I love that skill set for the kids of being adaptable, of actually, I feel like a lot of the kids that I've met just in our travels, not only just like within the United States, but international. And there's a lot of parents that take their kids on these crazy backpacking trips, and they're 6 months gone from school because they're like, dude, like they'll learn more out here. And those kids are so well-rounded and so able to adapt to situations, and they sit at dinner tables with other adults, and it's just like, wow, like it's insane to see how well-rounded these kids are. And I've put that pattern together from noticing the parenting styles of people that are exactly what you just said about, we're going to have our kids like adapt to our lives instead of adapting through what we think is like what their life would be.
Yeah. Do you think that you guys will do, like moving forward, that you'll, like Keaton, like you are just going to kind of assume the role of a stay-at-home dad while y'all are traveling? Or do you think that you'll rotate where like Alex will stay home, Keaton will work? Or what do you think like the system is? Or do you even know that? Do you just take it one contract at a time?
So thus far, the biggest deterrent for me traveling right now is that I would make $1,000 less a week to work 5/8 versus 3/12 for her. So that's been, originally our plan had been to kind of rotate. It depends on how things go. I don't think I'm going to go too much terribly longer without taking a contract, just because I want a change of pace, every once in a while too. And I think it's valuable for her to have the time home with the kids as well.
Yeah.
But, as we haven't made any definitive decisions, we've even considered, once Jade is school age, is homeschooling something we want to take on, with the RV. Like it's a lot easier to pack up and go place to place with the RV compared to doing traditional housing. Hang on just a second. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll take over. We've discussed homeschool, and I think if we homeschooled, I don't know, we might have to like commit more to like, this is the parent that's like driving the homeschool idea, just for the kids' consistency. But the other thing is with like, the reason we haven't rotated a whole lot is, I work 3 days a week. And so like right now we're in the middle of a 6-day stretch off. And that would never happen with a physical therapy contract. Like the best he would get would be like 4 10s. So it honestly has allowed us just a lot more flexibility to travel and go do things, and spend time together. Whereas like if he was at a PT job, we'd be looking at like a more Monday through Friday. But we also probably need to rotate, at least to keep his resume like somewhat like fresh, and his like skills and stuff like up. We talked about maybe in the spring
he'll take a contract even if we have to take a financial like hit for it.
Yeah, totally. I think Kim and I have even seen that in our lifestyle because of the fact that, IR, yeah, we have call, but typically I am 8 to 5:30, 4:10s, if not, 5/8s, but it's still like my schedule is daytime. Whereas we've been seeing a lot of contracts for her being variable shifts and weekends and,
nights and calls.
Ultrasound's gone more 24/7 kind of style, and the travelers are usually filling those holes. And so we've just been like, I'll take this because it works. Money is typically around the same with us, so that's not kind of like a deciding factor. But I always have a better schedule, which has led to me working, and now Kim's almost a year and a half not scanning, which we've been in like a weird kind of thing of like, okay, are we approaching that time where Kim no longer works in the hospital?
Right. Yeah, because it's like I've been a sonographer for 15 years, so it's easy for me to like pick it back up, but it's that, okay, you want to be able to keep your skills up. But I do, again, just going back to, I love the fact that we have this freedom to make these choices, right? Like you guys get to decide, hey, do you want to stay home next, Alex? And like, I'm going to work so you can be with the girls, and then you can go back and forth, or you can decide to homeschool or not. Like, it's just the freedom that we have to make these kinds of decisions. I think is such a cool part of this lifestyle. And I know like we get a lot of questions in our Facebook group of just like, hey, I want to travel, but I have kids. Like, do people actually do this? Is this a thing? And obviously we don't have kids. So we know people that travel with kids. We have no advice for that. But what would you guys say to somebody who's like, hey, I really want to travel. I have young kids, so maybe they're not in school yet, like your girls. What would be like any tips or advice that you would give people who want to take the leap but are scared to do it with children? Like any advice?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is, like I said, just having an open mindset, realizing that like as much as we try to make our kids, adjustable and adaptable, like things just move slower with kids, I feel like. And that's like with everything. Like, I mean, just getting out the door in the morning is not as efficient. And, we're 3 years in now, so it's a lot easier to like accept that it's kind of hard at the beginning. But then like, it was like a readjustment when we started road tripping a lot with the kids, because we were like, oh, we used to, be able to make a 12-hour drive in one day easily. Whereas now we're more likely to be like, oh, we need to break that up into like 2 days, We've
actually started driving overnight a lot, because that's one of the few things in my skill set is I do really enjoy driving, and it's a lot easier. I just put all three of the girls to bed and I drive overnight places.
Yeah.
Because that way I don't even have to worry about it.
Yeah, and they sleep and they're not like, getting restless. So it's just kind of like, it's harder to like push it, I feel like, when you have kids, because if they're tired or they're grumpy, like sometimes
know when to accept defeat.
yeah you have to be like, you know what, enough is enough. Like we did the one night, we were driving separately, and I had the girls, and I had literally just finished like an Alani energy drink, and Keaton had just finished a Bang, but we were like calling each other on the road. And the girls like lost their shit. And I was like, all right, I'm done. Like, I can't do this. Like, I was planning on driving till like 1, 2 in the morning. And it was like 10 p.m. And we like pulled off, and we were sleeping in our camper. So we just like pulled off and got in the camper. And then we talked about it the next morning, and we said we were both laying there like wide awake because we had energy drinks. And we were like, oh shit.
Well, so that particular instance, that was when we had first gotten the RV and we're coming back from Richmond to Kansas City. But I was picking up a mantle from my grandparents' house in Ohio for that, so we were taking different routes.
Yeah, we were going like crazy.
And so as I mentioned, I don't mind driving at night at all. And so my plan had been I was going to drive almost all the way to Ohio and get there at 3 or 4 in the morning, and then pick up the thing and then drive the rest of the way home while she was going the other direction. Well, because we were still close enough when she called me, we were like, oh, well, we can save money on like a hotel. We can just stay in the camper on the side of the road, that kind of thing. But we were both completely wired. And I remember laying there until like 1 or 2 in the morning thinking like, oh, I could be in this state by now. I could be in this state by now.
Oh my God.
Well, and I think it's just like making that choice. Like and this is like here's some marriage advice for you too. But just making that choice, like obviously we've been together for 15 years. Like we piss each other off all the time. It's just reality. Okay. Whatever. But like, but it's like you have to make a choice of like what's worth it, what's not worth it, when you're gonna just kind of be like accept it and move on. And I feel like traveling with kids has just like amplified that like times 10, because it's like when the kids are losing their mind, it doesn't help if one of us starts like spiraling as well. Like so it's, but like we're adults, so we have the choice to be like, I'm going to take a deep breath, like take control of my emotions. Like, I mean, sometimes one of us like puts our headphones in and like does the dishes or something, because it's like you just need to like get in your own head and like away from everybody else. And but it's like making that conscious decision of like, we chose to do this, we want to make this work, like we're all in it together, we're on the same team. I think that's a lot of a lot of what we repeat to each other when we're like, because a lot of times, you know, like kids can't regulate their emotions and like they'll be like losing their mind, and we're like, ah! And then you naturally want to start taking that out on each other. But you have to remind yourself, like, we're in this together, we're on the same team. Like it's not benefiting anybody if like one of us starts like freaking out. So
and the other side too, getting back specifically to dealing with the kids, is especially living in an RV, we're in a small enclosed space with 4 people and 2 small children. And so knowing each other's
2 adults and 2 small children.
Yeah,
there's no other adults.
But anyways, but like knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses, whether it's household wise, and particularly with the kids, has been vital. Because like she said, there's moments where, you know, we have not great days. The kids aren't going well. You know, we've maybe been more snippy to each other than we should be. But knowing that, like, okay, even when she's exhausted, I'm exhausted, and the girls are having a problem X, Y, or Z, I know that bedtime and nap time is my skill set. So no, the last thing I want to do right now is have to be in charge of bedtime and everything. But I know what's best for everybody involved in the situation is if I just take over and do it. And there's several instances when we're out in public. A lot of times if the kids are being a little bit more, you know, rambunctious, that kind of thing, I get more frustrated with that than she does. So she's better at corralling the kids like if we're out at a restaurant than I am. And so knowing each other's strengths and when to say, nope, I got this, don't worry. We're both tired, we're both stressed, we're both upset, but I can do X while you do Y, has been really vital.
Yeah, and then the only other thing that came up as he was saying this is like I think the hardest part about traveling with kids, in the sense of like travel.
Are you guys still there? I can't hear you. I think you're gone. Because... You're so close. You're so freaking close. Oh, wait.
I'm back. Okay, I don't know what happened.
Okay.
I'm just going to keep talking.
Yeah, keep going.
So I think the hardest part about like being away with small kids has been just figuring out how to get like our alone time both like separately and together as well. So that's probably been like, we don't really feel confident like hiring like babysitters and stuff that we don't know, and so we haven't really like gone into that. But like, you know, there's days where like I can tell Keaton's just been like, you know, burning out, like 3 in a row at the hospital or something. A lot of times I come, you know, the next day that we're all home, he's a little burnt, and I'll be like, okay, girls, we're like going to Target. Like, it's not even that big of a deal, but like just leave. Keaton's an introvert, and so like letting him have his alone time for a few hours while we like go run errands or something is really helpful. And then the other thing and then like I usually will be like, oh, I'm gonna go, like a lot of times I'll like go to a coffee shop or something and like read or work on you know, like my business side of things. And so that's been really important, is like being more consciously aware of that. Because like at home I could be like, oh, I'm going to take the kids to my mom's house while I run errands or something. And then also the other thing that has been like a must is having a gym with childcare. Because
I can't believe how much of a difference that has made. So I was an athlete in college, then got away from it when I was in school and stuff. And I have been more consistent working out with kids since we started traveling, because at the same time, it's important to like get that time for yourself. Having a gym with childcare is my hour and a half break during the day. So when I'm with the kids, 3 days in a row, we go to the gym every single day, and they love it. They get socialization. There's usually toys to play with. We've done YMCA in the past. There's a new one we're at called Define Fitness here.
Yeah, we're at like a local gym.
So it's like a local gym, but having that childcare option gets them socialization that they maybe don't get as much unless we're going to like the park or something. But also, just having that time to myself, I'm probably in better shape now than I've been since I graduated college.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Well, and then like sometimes we'll like take the kids to childcare, and then like at the end maybe we'll like stretch or roll out or something, because we don't usually work out together, but we'll like do something like at the end where we can actually like sit and have a conversation, which is really important, I think, for our relationship. And yeah, it's been so good. Like I've been so impressed with the gym childcare. It's just like they literally like will have like whole like art projects that they're doing, or like themes for the week. Like and it's almost like, since the kids are in and out so much, like the caregivers aren't as like worn out. It's not like they're dealing with like the one like kid that misbehaves all day long, and so they're just kind of like super happy to see all the kids, and they seem like really bubbly and energetic. And that's been like everywhere we've been, like the YMCA and then this new gym we're at. But yeah, it's been and I've always done CrossFit. I really like classes and things like that, and so that was kind of a hard like pill for me to swallow, was like, this is just the stage of life I'm in. But like I'm trying to like embrace it, because it is, I would rather go to the gym and be able to drop them off at daycare, because I have taken the girls to CrossFit with me, and it's just like you have to bring like entertainment and snacks and all these things, and like sometimes you're like working out and then like they need something and you don't want them to disrupt the class, and so you're not really able to like focus on you. And so it's been really nice to like have that time where I'm like not trying to like half parent my kid, half work out.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I think that's such a good pro tip too, because being able, like even Keaton, like you said, you're with the girls, right, all day, but then that like that's your time, that you can drop them off for an hour and a half, and you still get a relief to take care of yourself, to fill yourself up, so that you can then go and be present with your girls. Like I think you guys you're showing people what's possible. Right.
Well, I was going to add, like we always say in our sign-offs, map your own path and always stay Travsessed, but you guys have literally mapped your own path, and that is like such a cool thing for people. It's almost like when people have excuses, I'm just going to be like Alex and Keaton. Like that's my answer. Like no excuses, make it work. And you guys are paving that path, and I love that.
Well, and it's like you guys, obviously, like you're saying, like you're not perfect, you don't have it all figured out, but like you're figuring it out as you go, and you're coming up with systems and structures that work for you and your family, and showing other people like you can travel with kids, and you can have these adventures and create a lifestyle that aligns with how you want to live and how you want to raise your children. And not only do you guys have 2 kids, you both you both work in healthcare, right? So like one at a time right now, but you both work. And then Alex, like you're an entrepreneur, you're building a business on the side. Like you've created stuff for us. Anyone who's going on the Patagonia trip, Alex created that amazing guide and the Traveler School workbook.
Yep.
And like, you're so incredibly talented. You're so detail oriented. You're so focused. You're building this copywriting business. Like you're like doing everything. And it's almost like I mean, you've already kind of laid it out in so many different ways of just kind of like how you balance all of that. Like you're kind of showing that you can, as long as you come up with a system and work together as a team, you really can, quote unquote, do all of the things in some kind of a way.
Yeah, totally. Because I mean, I almost get anxiety just thinking about the work and the kids and the RV and the relationship and yourself and the business. And it's like, holy shit. Like, it's impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, you also can't see what our camper currently looks like. But you know what I mean? That goes back to the like letting things go and prioritizing. No, we're the parents that like, oh, the kids go down for a nap and we like clean the whole space. But I will say, living in a camper, it gets messy faster, but it's also super easy to clean.
I can clean this thing top to bottom in under 30 minutes if I have to.
Yeah, like
Nice.
it's super nice. So.
Seriously, that's what I love about
No.
when we live in small apartments and stuff. Like, of course, I would love a little bit more space, like maybe an extra room or an office space. But I love living in a small space because it literally takes 30 minutes. Everything is clean. And then you're like, cool, like good to go. Instead of spending like hours cleaning a house, doing all the chores, like, you know, so you have more time to enjoy your adventures, you know, and the traveling and.
Or what else you want to fill it with.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, obviously,
and that's true. I think that's been the big thing is like we get to work on our terms. We get to like, spend like whole day off, like doing household tasks. Like it's all based around like what our priorities and our values are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. And I think too, like one thing that we didn't mention that I wanted to say too is I love that you guys are showing that life doesn't have to stop with these big life decisions. You can kind of keep that your life going, your kids' life going. You can have kids and still travel. It's not like, wow, our life's over if we have to go settle if we're going to have kids. And I love that you're paving that path for people to know that your lives can continue in the direction that you want it to go. And these big life events don't have to take you out of that dream, that adventure, like whatever it is
building
that you're
a
shooting
business.
for. Yeah.
Well, and I think because that's one thing, you know, Erin and I are currently talking about in our own life about, you know, getting to that stage where like we do want to have a family, which we didn't know for many, many years. We thought we didn't. And now we're like, no, like we do want to have kids, but can we still travel? And, you know, we're planning all these adventure trips and we're like, I don't think we can do that with kids and we can't keep doing what we're doing. Things have to change. And like people like you guys are showing others what's possible, that you can have a family and live this life, and it might look a little bit different, but you're going to figure out your new normal and new flow. And that's inspiring for people who
like us
who are considering it. And we're like, okay, here's another example, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, well, and I think it's kind of cool to like build that community because I know like you guys obviously know Steve and Ellen, and like it's so fun. Like we're trying to like plan because we're like 4 hours from them, and so we're like, oh, we can get together and like do things with other people who are also a little crazy and do all these crazy things with children versus like traditional people all the time are like, let's go do this thing, or like let's go hike with our 1-year-old. They'd be like, heck no. And
Yeah.
we're like, oh cool, like you're crazy too, we can go do these crazy things together. And like, you know, or I've even told like Steve and Ellen, you know, like if you guys need to like go somewhere for a few days, like we can take Kinley and like entertain her, and like, you know, like it's nice to have that like community, because like we're very blessed. Our family is very accommodating if we need to like go on trips and stuff like that. Like, you know, I know some people aren't that lucky, but
honestly, I don't think my parents have missed us coming to visit for a single travel assignment.
yeah, but yeah, it's nice to have that community where you can be like, hey, we could even like trade kids for a little bit if we need to.
Yeah.
So it's just cool. Like
that's amazing. Yeah, that like-minded community. I mean, that really is that support system of in real life and then also online, like showing other people what's possible too. Like, I think that's amazing about this traveling life is just the community and all of us connecting and sharing, like just different ways of doing things. I mean, honestly, like I feel like I have so many more questions for you guys as far as like the kid thing and the RV thing. Like we could go on and on and on. But I think just kind of as we wind this down, where can people like find you, travel along, like follow along with your adventure? I know Alex, like you have your business on the side, copywriting, all that, like just kind of share about what you guys have going on and how people can like follow along with your crazy adventure.
Or ask questions if they have them about kids and RV life.
Yeah. So I pretty much like most of my like social media sharing now is on my like personal Instagram. That's where I share a lot about like traveling with the kids and stuff. And that's Alex McCoy _RN. So that's where you can find pretty much the bulk of my content. I have like a business Instagram as well. That's alexmccoy.co. But honestly, like I've had a lot of stuff keeping me busy for like current clients, and so there's not a lot on that Instagram yet because I just have not had the time to focus on that part of it, but which is a good thing. It's a good thing to have like, other things keeping me busy. But anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much where we share everything. Keaton doesn't have Instagram. He barely gets on Facebook. So
you can find me at the local Target pushing 2 toddler girls around
with his
Oh my god.
he's doing like Q&A in like aisle 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, dude, he's met
funny.
so many dads, though.
I've actually made a lot of friends with like random stay-at-home dads in different places. There are 2 different guys that gave me their number in that sounds really bad. Giving their number in Virginia, and then another guy that I met who in Omaha that we just started talking. We talked for like 40 minutes in a Target aisle. So
women are not this approachable. Like I've never just like made friends with some random lady at Target.
Right? I know. That's so cool though. Like just even having that kind of support of like dads being home and like having that kind of outlet. Like that's so cool.
It's definitely a paradigm shift from maybe even like 10 years ago or certainly from when we were growing up, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's amazing. Like, I want to have you guys back on and like talk specifically just about like some RV stuff because I feel like we didn't get to hit on that, but like I think that would be really cool just to talk about that because like I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, sure.
So we'll definitely do that. But thank you guys so much for
this was awesome.
Coming on and like being so like just open and vulnerable. And I think you guys shared like just a lot of great insight into what this life is like with kids and how you're figuring it out as you go and letting go of like having it be perfect and just like jumping in and letting the adventure kind of lead the way as y'all like figure it out together as a team.
And like mapping your own path. And I really love just touching again. It's something that resonated with me of just like knowing the strengths of your couple, of your partner is just such a big takeaway. And I don't think a lot of people take that into account and actually listen to that and hear that and figure that out because that's something that we do as well in our household of just knowing whose strengths are what and who can take over even if you're tired. And that's like a really huge thing, and I think it comes with the compassion for your partner, but also the communication and also the initiative to know that like, hey, I'm good at this, I'll take this. And I think that was a huge takeaway in this podcast.
It's like a marriage pro tip. If anyone just took that one thing,
game over.
Yeah, totally. It sounds simple in theory.
Right.
In practice, it can be a little more challenging, but
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being on the podcast and go follow them. Go follow Alex. Check them out. Follow their adventures. And we will see you guys out there.
Yes, we will.
All right. Thanks guys.